Hi, everybody. This is Ralph for WeatherWool. We're here in early April in Missoula, Montana, and we're with my friend Brad Veis. Brad has been wearing WeatherWool for 6 years, and one of the things that came up a few minutes ago that I think is kind of neat was we have different memories of how we first got to know each other. And what I remember was that I got a text message from one of the mountain men on History Channel's TV show. I think it was Mike Horstman on Kodiak Island, but I don't remember which mountain man it was. And he was saying, you know, my cameraman lent me his jacket and I really liked it. And it was like I was completely spaced on it. I didn't know what he was talking about. And so I said, well, that's great, but like, who? And so he gave me your name, and I couldn't remember your name. So I looked you up, and I see, okay, this, you know, Brad ordered a jacket or an anorak in 2018, but it doesn't say anything like Brad working for the History Channel or, you know, like Brad wants free stuff or anything like that. It was, you know, it was just an order. And so I said, oh, that's pretty cool. And then so I was going back and forth with, again, I think it was Mike, and he said, I really liked it, and you know, I got to, like, I'm pretty slow on picking things up, but eventually I get it, and it's like like send me something and it'll wind up on TV. So that's what I remember as how I first got to know you a little bit, and how WeatherWool first got to be on the Mountain Men, because you, of course, are the cameraman, and nobody sees you normally. So yeah, you might have been working on the show in WeatherWool for a while, but I never saw it and nobody knew it. But that's not what you remember.
No, I think it was another mountain man called you, but he called me first and was like, because he was a new character. He was just getting ready for his first season. And he said he talked to you and that you were sending him some stuff. So I called you and I said, hey, I just want to make sure that, you know, we're not going to like do a commercial out of this, you know, for you. We're not going to be like, hey, WeatherWool is the best. Because I know that happens, like, especially with the old school, like, Sportsman's channel, you know, you get free stuff, then we do a commercial. So, and then we started talking, and yeah, away we went.
You know, another thing we were talking about was that, this is another thing that makes me laugh, is that people will often say to me, you know, I like the lynx pattern, but I don't know if it'll work in town. Like, I can see it to be really good camouflage in the woods, but you know, what happens if I want to go to a restaurant? And what I tell everybody is that it'll be fine in town. It'll be fine in almost any kind of city or business setting, but you can't be a shy violet. That, like, when you walk around, you walk into a store or something, people will notice the lynx pattern, and a lot of people will comment on it. And if you don't want anybody to notice you, then like don't wear lynx in the city. It'll be, not that it'll be considered inappropriate, but people, I mean, I walk around and people say stuff to me, and you know, if I look like you, people would say a lot more stuff. And I think you were the first person who told me that the main problem you have with lynx pattern is that people keep wanting to touch you.
Well, it looks so soft, you know. It's so unique. The lynx pattern, it's just unique because it stands out against all of the other like mainstream camouflage. To me, it doesn't read like camouflage unless you're using it that way. It's just,
that's it.
It's just, yeah, it's an upscale. It's texture, and I think people like texture. And wool is so uncommon anymore. You know, everybody's wearing whatever Gucci puffy jacket, but when it comes to the wool stuff, especially in the lighter colors like that the lynx pattern is, they're like, oh, what is that? Mm-hmm. And then the next thing you know, they're like grabbing your arm. And they're like, wow, it's really soft. And you're like, yeah, it is. It's great. That's why I love it. So, because it doesn't feel like wool. It's not like your old school, your grandpa's old boiled wool from 1820.
You know, that was part of the reason we started the company, because I wanted woolens that felt soft and comfortable like my business suits, but woolens that also worked against the weather and the cold, mm-hmm. like my outdoor stuff, my hunting stuff, and that's where the kind of like where the company came from. And with lynx pattern, I really wanted a camouflage pattern that wasn't a camouflage pattern. So Debbie called it camo, and my son Alex was a big part of that. And we wanted something that would work in the city and look pretty, be admired as stylish or just beautiful, but then would disappear in the woods. And so we bought a lynx pelt, among other things, and that's where this came from.
I think you got it pretty spot on. I mean, it looks like a cat for sure. I mean, that was my initial attraction to it. I've always loved camo. I remember my mom brought me home like a BDU woodland top from Salvation Army when I was a kid, and I was like, that's the coolest thing ever. So I've always had this fascination with camouflage and doing all that. And when I got my old career, I spent a lot of time outside doing the mountain man show or the hunting shows or whatever it was. So I was always looking to upgrade and get the best gear to be the most comfortable. And I was looking to switch up and get back into wool. But most of the jackets, I would say, that were on the market weren't going to fill that niche for me. And just because they were old, and it was like, when I was a kid wearing wool, you were always itchy and hot and uncomfortable. And then I don't remember who had it on. It was some bushcrafter had on a lynx pattern anorak. And I was like, I need to have that. I don't care what it costs.
I should have known.
Right? I was like, I have to have that. That looks so cool. And I hemmed and hawed on it and scraped some money together. And I think it was like right around Christmas. I think it was just after Christmas, and I pulled the trigger. And I think I maybe called you, or I sent you an email or a text. I think I sent you an email, and you wouldn't remember this. Why would you? It's just another customer, right? But I was like, do you have that in stock? Because your stocks were always low. And you're like, yeah. And I was like, okay, cool. And I pressed send or whatever to initiate the transaction. Mm-hmm. But then I got it, and then I was like, wow, this is really cool. And that was where my, I guess, journey started with wearing the whole WeatherWool. Because
yeah, one of the reasons that I really like having you wear it was because of what you did traveling as a cameraman, and I know you had some other roles as well, but you were on location in a lot of different places in a lot of different environments, and then moving through airports. And when you're on the go, you need garments that can fill cover a lot of different bases, so that you can reduce the amount of things that you carry. And so I know that you've probably been as many places and in as many different environments in our wool as anybody. But the one environment that I really remember you telling me about, you didn't bring the wool. That was the island of Borneo.
Yeah, I didn't bring it.
Well, I know. So
I wish I would have.
It might have helped against bugs or something.
Yeah, I think.
But Borneo has always interested me because of the location, pretty much on the equator, like unbelievable tropical jungle. I think it's maybe the second largest island in the world. It's, from what I've read, I mean, you've been there, but just setting the table a little bit, I think it's roughly circular and about 1,000 miles in diameter. It's gigantic. And I was just reading the other day that it's parts of it are so remote and so difficult to penetrate and operate in, and so full of life, that they're discovering new species. There are multiple new species a week routinely in Borneo, because there's so many different kinds of insects and plants and birds. And you had told me that the island is partly belongs to, I guess, Indonesia and partly Malaysia, and that generally those two countries aren't that friendly, and so the border of the two countries is a little bit of a sketchy area up in the and you were operating around there filming.
Yeah, we were just right where kind of the Indonesian army has like their last army outpost. So then it goes into like no man's land, and then it's Malaysia from up there, which when you're traveling in third world countries, that's kind of the place you don't want to be, is in that in between. When we checked in, as we were making our way upriver, because we were taking those big dugout canoes upriver, we checked into an army outpost at one point.
So the rivers are all flowing outward to the sea, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So you're paddling or you're motoring?
No, you have those long tail motors. So it's it's like a big lawnmower engine on there, and then there's a drive shaft that comes off and down, and then it's got the prop on the back of that, and that's how we'd shoot up or down the river. So there's a guy in the back running the motor, and it's on a tiller, and they're super dangerous. They weld, they take rebar and weld like cages around them, because inevitably what happens is everybody has to get out and push these boats upstream while you're pushing as hard as you can, and the guy on the motor's just giving it all it's got. And then the next thing you know is that prop's whipping right past your head. So luckily we didn't have any problems with that. I think one time a motor mount broke and the tiller shot forward, but yeah, it's rough.
So those are dugout canoes, meaning they were made from a single tree?
A single hardwood tree. Yeah, I don't know how much they weigh, but it was a lot. So we'd be out picking rock in front of it to get the boat to pass through, and then there's another one of the other guys is up front with a stick or a paddle, depending on what the needs are, so he can push that bow back and forth.
Steer.
Yeah, and then the other guy is on the back just ripping that motor.
And how many people altogether?
There'd be 4 of us in a canoe. So there's the guy up front, the guy running the motor, and then there were 2 of us.
So 2 locals and two visitors. And how big is this canoe, lengthwise?
I think it was, I feel like it was 14 feet long. And then the tail, it extends 5 or 6 feet out beyond that. And they're heavy. I mean, they are, there was the dugout canoes, and then they had another one that they made out of boards. They'd shape the boards around, but they're all hardwood boards. So, I mean, they're not light, but man, they could take a hit for sure.
So some of that wood sinks.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't been there, tested it, but I've read that teak wood sinks. It's so heavy.
Yeah, I mean, I believe it. But those guys are master craftsmen with a chainsaw. I mean, we watched them cut out dimensional, perfect lumber, and they built us, picnic tables in the jungle. But it was perfect. It was like, where's the mill? And they're like, oh, right here, brap, brap.
Wow.
This guy with a chainsaw.
And it sounds like the streams were very shallow. That's why were there leeches and stuff that you had to deal with when you were pushing?
No, the leeches were all on the land. So
leeches.
They're not on the water. Yeah, they're on the land, and they'll crawl up the brush, and they're everywhere. They'll get you. So I always tried to, being the camera guy, I was lucky. So I could always be further back in the lineup, so everybody else would get all the leeches.
I don't know if I ever even heard of land leeches.
Yeah, apparently there's one there in Borneo, because I would always read a book on all the places I was going before I'd get there, so I kind of had, some knowledge, I guess. But apparently there's one there that's like a foot long that'll just stand in the middle of the trail and wiggle at you.
I'm just thinking, like, monkeys have hands, and monkeys can probably, plus they have their friends. So monkeys must pull the leeches off each other or themselves.
Yeah.
But there's probably, they have like wild pigs or something, or like, what would be the natural target of a leech? That would be like a...
Oh yeah, there was pigs there, wild boars. So the hunters would go out every night and try to bring back camp meat. So there was wild boar. There was a little tiny deer that we would eat. But yeah, they're going. They have. There's a golden bear there. I think it's a gold bear or the sun bear or something like that. So
I've
there was
heard
a bear.
Sun bear. I know it was
yeah,
Oreo,
and there's all kinds of stories of old, like prehistoric rhinoceros and jungle creatures.
Right.
I mean, the jungle is so dark, especially there.
And yeah, I don't know what's on Borneo, but I know that there's still Asian rhinos in Southeast Asia, an elephant, and the orangs. They have the orangs on Borneo. That's one of the places, right? Yep. You didn't see any, did you?
No, we didn't. No, we didn't.
I think
see
they're pretty
anything.
hard to. They're pretty rare. And how long were you there altogether?
I think we were in the jungle for about 2 weeks.
Can you tell us what you were filming?
Yeah, so we were working on a show for Animal Planet, and it was called Fish or Die. So we were trying to get up as far as we could go into the darkest corners to try to catch fish. On fly fish. So
fly fishing in the jungle. I mean, how wide were these? The rivers would have to be pretty wide to enable you to.
So in Borneo, we'd get off kind of that mainstream, big, murky water, and then we were going up the mountains. So it's all Clear Creek, like freestone stuff. So it's beautiful. you would look around and it would seem like, I mean, you were in the Jungle Book, right? There's giant vines going across that are as thick as your leg, and the water's crystal clear, and those fish are spooky. I mean, we would be like, if we saw a spot that the guys wanted to fish, we would detour through the jungle and then try to sneak in on it, because there's not a lot of there's like zero historical knowledge on how to fly fish in Borneo. I mean, there's the guides that do it are awesome. I still keep in touch with some of them.
Really?
But it's all just trying to figure it out. So the fish we were going after, they thought were keying in on a berry that would fall off the tree, this little red berry. So the guys tied up these flies, and then they would just slap the water. But you'd only get one or two shots on it. And we caught some fish, but nothing.
Were they trout?
No, it was the Messir.
Oh,
Yeah.
I've heard of those. They get very big.
Yeah, they get very big. So we were hunting after those guys. They caught a couple of smaller ones, but nothing huge. But that's kind of the curse of fly fishing. You're not.
Well, also, the Messir that I've heard of were in small streams, but they were down low, and they're kind of like a giant trout, I think. I don't know. And if I remember, also very predatory, like they're eating mice and gophers or something.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, and I think that was what we were always trying to, the problems we were trying to crack is like, what do these fish eat?
And then you did the Mountain Men for how many years?
12
Whoa.
season. Yeah, I worked on that from the beginning.
So you were able to do the fishing show in the midst of the Mountain Men show. Then it sounds like.
Yeah, I think the fishing show and Mountain Men kind of ran into each other. But when I was off the fishing show, there was still plenty of Mountain Men left to shoot. So yeah, we were always busy. But Mountain Men, I mean, there was a lot of good times there.
Yeah,
for sure. That's where I got to really field test all the, the WeatherWool stuff, which was great.
Well, that's somewhere on the website. I think I put that old, a lot of people wearing WeatherWool probably don't know who Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers are, but they were probably like the toast of the dance world on Hollywood in the 1940s, I guess, maybe 1950s. And Fred Astaire was renowned to be this incredible dancer. And then somebody said, yeah, well, Ginger Rogers did everything Fred Astaire did backwards in heels. And that's kind of like, the cameramen are doing everything that the talent is doing. But you got this big camera and you're trying to hold it steady and make sure the batteries don't run out. And I don't know what else there is. The lenses don't get fogged up or wet.
Oh yeah, there's 1,000 little things you have to pay attention to, and it's always frustrating.
So some guys chopping a log or field dressing an animal and that might look like it takes some technique, but I think getting it on film and making it look really good and watchable is probably a lot harder than whatever it was that the guy was doing, especially given that he's done it a lot of times.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's amazing anything actually gets on TV. I mean, to be honest, you're taking a camera system out into some of the worst environments that a camera could go, and then you're just beating the hell out of it every day, all day. I mean, it's strapped to a snowmobile. It falls off a side-by-side. It rolls down a mountain. But you still got to get those shots. So, yeah.
So for, say, the Mountain Men, usually it's a 90-minute, it's 90 minutes, it seems like. And so of the 90 minutes, maybe something like 60 or 70 minutes is not commercial. Mm-hmm. So let's just say it's an hour of solid video that they show on Thursday night, at least in my neighborhood. So how many hours of film does it take to edit it down to 60 minutes or so?
I think it usually broke down to 2 days, 2.5 days to go out there and film a story. So depending on what, kind of the goal or the objective was or what you were trying to shoot, you'd have about 2.5 days to get about a 10 to a 13 minute edited story that would go into that.
Right. And so Mountain Men is usually they circulate from 4 or 5 different guys each week.
Yep. And there's so much that goes into it, because you go out there and you press record and you follow the action. So you've got those hours on the ground, which a lot of times you're working like 8 to 15 to 24 hours, because who knows what's going on, especially when you want to, like if you're doing a hunt or something like that. But then it goes through the post process, and then all those people get their hands on it and work their systems through it. So by the time, I don't even know how long.
So in say 2.5 days, you've probably been rolling for, I don't know, you must have slept some. So say 2.5 days, maybe you had 20, 30 hours of film, and you don't edit that though. That wasn't you.
No,
I was
just in the field. Yeah.
Did you have some kind of satellite uplink from the field, or would you?
We would load everything onto hard drives.
Because I'm just thinking that you're out in these crazy places and you've done all this work, and you'd probably want to get it backed up like as quickly as you possibly could, just in case of the water rises again or whatever.
Oh, yeah. No, we would triple back everything up to hard drives. And if we could get a block of footage out, if we were somewhere for 2 weeks and we could get footage back to the office, we would always do it. I've flown stuff out on helicopters before, just because we were getting a resupply for something else, or somebody was coming in. You'd throw the hard drives on there and get them back, but you always retained a copy, because you didn't want them to fall out of the helicopter or whatever shipping service. They lose stuff. And that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money to get that stuff.
Yeah, sure.
On the TV, so, and timelines and budgets and that whole thing. So yeah, there's a lot of stress there trying to get it, and then plus you're trying to survive. You're trying to not break your leg or die or whatever to get the shots. Which when you're younger, it's easier to make those risky maneuvers. Then you get a little older and you're like, oh.
Yeah, and I know that's part of the reason that you're not doing it anymore. Maybe not the risk, but you have a 5-year-old and a missus to think about now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So which pieces of WeatherWool do you have? I'm trying to remember. So you got the CPO now.
Yeah, the CPO and the Mouton.
Oh, that's right. So, can you tell us? So I think I remember this. So you were going up to Alaska in January to film Ivy and Brett.
Yep.
And it was going to be well below 0 Fahrenheit, so like 20 below Celsius or colder.
Yeah.
And we got the Mad Taylor up in Whitefish, and you went up there and spent some time with the Mad Taylor. So the Mouton jacket that we're talking about now, it's on the website, and we've suspended production of it, trying to figure some things out. It seems like the Mad Taylor in Whitefish, Montana, is the only one who can make it well enough that Debbie, who's in charge of like whether or not stuff is good enough, is comfortable with. So I need to get up there and speak with him again. We were hoping to see him this trip, actually, because he's not that far from here, but we just kind of ran out of time. So you have the Mouton jacket, which is our full weight fabric lined with what's called Mouton, which is the pelt of a sheep or a lamb. Actually, it's similar to shearling, but it's much more consistent, thick, plush, uniform, and because it has the pelt of the sheep in between our fabric and the wool of the sheep on the inside of the jacket, the pelt, the leather, makes it windproof, and it's extremely warm. I've worn it a bunch of times in New Jersey, and nothing that New Jersey dishes out comes anywhere near getting through there. But I've never worn it in the conditions that you were.
Yeah, it's the greatest jacket, I think, of all time.
No, I'm serious. We have to make it.
Well, I'll tell you why. Yeah, no, so I could wear that jacket, and we were doing a lot of snow machining, snowmobile riding, for people that don't get that one. I would wear that with a wool t-shirt on underneath, and that was it. And it would be 30 below, 35 below, snow machine all day.
Yeah, at 35 below 0, whether it's Celsius or Fahrenheit, it's almost the same. minus 40 equals minus 40. So
Yeah.
that's cold.
It was really cold. So I had that. I had a fur hat that I bought. It was an otter fur with beaver on the inside, and I'll send you some pictures. You can cut them in. But there's pictures that I would take of me on the snow machine, like basically 100% encased in ice, and I'm just, you're happy as a clam.
And you're just wearing a t-shirt underneath.
Just a t-shirt underneath and this jacket. And I think that's kind of the amazing part about WeatherWool to me, is that and you have to give yourself over to the whole system. You have to be like, I'm a wool guy now, a natural fiber guy. So, I could work it. I lived in that jacket, for 45 days. Not all at once, but I mean, that was my jacket.
You were 2 or 3 trips up there.
Yeah,
right?
we had 3 trips up there, and I wore it every time. And without this sounding like a marketing scam ad,
okay.
The deal is I could have that jacket on and I would be warm. I could sleep, I'm pretty sure, underneath a tree with it on. But I could work all day in it. So, when you're ripping snow machines through those spruce thickets, and they all have little spears on them that break off. I mean, there's not one hole in it. There wasn't a seam pop or a hole, and
Wow.
Yeah. I think it's hard to explain to people because, people aren't used to wearing wool. They're used to wearing high-speed puffy coats, is what I'll call them. And those, they come in contact with a stick. I mean, I've seen guys with their brand new goose down jacket on, and they go next to a tree, and it's just like somebody shot a chicken. But I could be wet in it. I never overheated in it. I'd spill water on myself from filling stuff up, but it would just freeze and you just brush it off. At the end of the day.
I think you're the first person that told me. You may have said that before, but I don't remember anybody else telling me that they wore it over just a t-shirt. Was it a long sleeve or short sleeve?
It was a short sleeve t-shirt. Yeah, it was a short sleeve merino base layer.
It's got to be wool, but you think about people have been living up in that environment for thousands of years, and they were wearing nothing but skins the whole time. And similar to the mouton, the animal wears the skin with the fur on the outside, but the people, when they wear the animal's fur, they wear the fur, the hair on the inside, the leather on the outside. And then what we did was we put a layer of our fabric over the top of it. But that's kind of like what the natives have been wearing since time immemorial up there. Not that different. What's kind of different about sheep, though, again, this is just me reading books, no personal experience, but what I read about the caribou skins that are traditional in the far north is that they're crazy warm. The only thing that seems to be warm enough to get you through the real winter up there. But the caribou skins, like all deer hair, is hollow and brittle, and the deer hair does its job for a while, the caribou hair, but it's brittle, so it snaps off, and after a while the garment loses its warmth because the hair is just falling away. And wool, for whatever reason, which is of course the inside of our mouton jacket, same idea, the hair on the inside, but the wool's not brittle at all. It just compresses or springs back, and you go one way or the other, but it won't break off the way the caribou will. So it's really the very same principle. That's been the only thing that worked there since
the natural. If God made it, it's going to be better than anything man could make. So I don't mind being cold. Like in the cold, I hate being cold. Once I get cold, I just I'm done. I'm over it. I want to go make a fire and get a cup of coffee and crawl into a sleeping bag or something. And when I made that switch over to wool, and it took me a while to get my systems down and be like, okay, this is all I really need to wear is all this wool. You're just happier. You're just, because you can live and you can survive, and it's not a big thing.
Well, what we were saying before, you're 37, so I'm 70, and somewhere in my early years, America kind of made the switch, and we were actually just yesterday talking to a young grad student named Macy. I'm sorry I didn't catch her last name. at Montana State University Wool Lab, and I was saying how one of the things that's been frustrating for me is when I try to do some research about how wool works, there isn't much out there. And I said, like, whatever I can find seems to come from like 1960. And I had a great year in 1960, so nothing against 1960. And I said, like, I don't understand what's everybody been doing since then, you know? And she said, in the early 60s, that's when synthetic clothing started coming out. And suddenly this stuff was way cheaper than wool. Mm-hmm. And the money flowed away from wool, and people weren't trying to figure things out about wool anymore. And it all shifted to the synthetics. And that was, say, roughly 60 years ago. And it's coming back to wool now, but the research really hasn't started up again yet. But that's the thing. If you're much younger than me, and there aren't that many people who are older than me anymore. If you're younger than around 60, probably 50 for sure, all you've really heard about big time is synthetics. And now just lately, wool is starting to come up again. And there are some companies that never really went away. Filson and Burberry and Pendleton and Woolrich have been around, but they've totally taken a back seat. And even Woolrich has gone largely synthetic, and that's what people are so used to wearing that. And then people also think, because I know I've talked to a lot of people, they think, I got my cell phone here, like, holy smoke. I came here in a jet plane, 6 hours from New York to LA, and I've been surfing the web on my phone the whole time. And like, what does a sheep know compared to all this marvelous stuff that we can do in the lab? But, you look into what's in that sheep's fiber, and of course the sheep doesn't know much. Sheep knows about as much about its wool as I know about digestion. But I'm still really good, obviously, at digestion. one of my talents. Yeah. So, the animal doesn't have to know. Nature figured that out, or like you said, God figured it out. And America is starting to figure out now that, okay, the synthetics may have their virtues. They can be very lightweight. Mm-hmm. They can be inexpensive, but you know what? Some of the high-end synthetics are like right up there with anything WeatherWool is putting out cost-wise. And you get that stuff near a fire. Mm-hmm. Like you said, you brush it up against a tree, you get it wet, and you figure, well, there are some natural products that are really, really still shining.
I think it's that niche you want to fill, right? It's all about layering, and everybody wants to layer, and you got to have this layer, and I got to have this piece, and I got to have that, and then it's raining, and I got to switch out and put a shell on, and then this is warm when it's wet, but this isn't. And I think that's where wool, and WeatherWool especially, eliminates those needs in what I take when I go outside. Like when I'm elk hunting in Montana, even if it's going to be around 0 or maybe a little bit below, like I take this CPO jacket and same thing, t-shirt on underneath, because I know I'm going to be walking, I'm going to be hiking, and then when I'm stopping, I can throw this on and be warm enough and be just fine because I know what I'm getting into when I go out there. And then I have a cashmere scarf, and I bring that fur hat along. Yeah. But I don't have to bring all of that other stuff because you bulk out before you hit your weight limit 99% of the time. And I think that's where wool really shines. And you can fall down in a stream when you have your wool on, and you can pop out, and you can light a fire, and then you can pretty much lay on the fire, and the wool's going to be fine. It's going to dry out as fast as you need it to.
Yeah, Cody and I both did some water testing in the cold, and those videos are on our website. And for people in the Celsius world, Brad was talking about 0 Fahrenheit or a little below, so around minus 20 Celsius. Most people would need more than the CPO in a t-shirt, but you're Montana born and raised, and so you have a higher cold tolerance than most people. But also, I don't know about right here in Missoula, but in the West, in the Rockies, and particularly at elevation, I find that the dry air adds about anywhere from 10 or even 20 degrees to the perceived temperature for somebody from the East Coast like me. Like in New Jersey, we hardly ever get 0 Fahrenheit, but 0 Fahrenheit out there is way colder than 0 Fahrenheit here.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad we don't have to deal with too much of that humidity here, but that's where you just need, you know, just one more layer of wool. You don't need 6 puffy jackets.
Yeah,
and or being able to put you know your wax canvas over the top.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that kind of cuts that and bucks that wind and that humidity a little bit.
Well, that's one of the things. You know, I have a son who lives in Wyoming, and our customers in Wyoming always say, like, you know, you got to have some kind of a windbreak, because our full weight fabric is designed to stop a wind of about 15 miles an hour, which is about 24 kilometers per hour, and our midweight will stop a wind of about 10, which is 10 miles an hour, about 16 kilometers per hour. And that's my design choice. I don't want to make the weaves tighter than they are. We can make them as tight as we want, but the tighter they get, the less they breathe. And you need to, as a designer, you have to try to figure out what balance you want to make between breathability and wind resistance. I think, and here's where I disagree or I part ways with a lot of the synthetics guys, and they'll say their stuff is breathable and windproof. I don't disagree with them, but I will say I have never experienced that. There's a lot of stuff come out that I haven't worn, so maybe that holy grail is out there. But for me, and at least when you're designing woolens, you need to decide how much wind do I want to stop, how much do I want this garment to breathe. And so for people in Wyoming, I say, you know, like you might want to have a windbreaker with you, but merely stopping the wind is a very simple thing to do. You know, a plastic bag will do that. So that's something that I recommend people have, like a traditional windproof, waterproof shell in their backpack.
Yeah. I really like, and I've had really good luck with the Fjallraven stuff, because they do that G1000, and then you can wax it up, and I'll put that over as kind of my windbreak layer.
Other people have told me they put that over their anorak, because I think they make an anorak in that fabric. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think so.
They said, and they put that anorak as a second layer over ours. I think that's one of the next frontiers in woolen. We'll start, you know, because most of the value in the sheep industry is the meat, like by far the most value. The wool that comes off the sheep doesn't pay for much more than the shearing. So the wool is, like they take the money and they have to shear the sheep, but it's the meat where it's all about. And so all the research has gone toward the meat. And now that people are turning again and realizing wool makes really good clothing, I'm hoping that we can get the universities and maybe some of the other large companies involved with wool to start like really trying to figure out what types of wool will be best for what purposes, and how can we make those types of wool better. You seem to be as much of a believer in wool as anybody, and you've been out there more than most of us, so you have a sense of what it can do. And just what you said, that you just have it with you and it handles what comes up.
Yeah, I think you just have to figure out a way to change public opinion on it and why it's better, which it's all marketing, right? At the end of the day, how do you get people to want to do it? And you have to have enough people out there that are wearing the stuff that you can get real, no BS. It works because of this. Like, I have this conversation with my friends. They're like, "Oh, it's heavy." I'm like, it's not that heavy. I mean, compared to what? What are we talking about here?
Right.
You know, and how do you kind of weigh out the cost benefit of switching over? Those same guys, they'll go drop all kinds of money on synthetics and polyesters because it works for them. So I think if you can get people switched over, and I don't think it would take that much to do it, but they just got to do it. They just got to go back to the old ways.
And that's one of the things that since day one, WeatherWool has always said, wear it for a few months, wear it all winter, send it back for a refund if you're not happy with it. We have had, I would say maybe 1 or 2% or something like that. Almost nobody sends it back. You know, if they buy it, they almost never send it back because it didn't perform. What people will return things to me because the they'll say, well, I couldn't get used to a pullover, so I want to switch it to the CPO. Or what has happened more than once is they'll say, you know what, like my anorak is warm enough. I actually don't need the all-around jacket that I like. They buy the anorak in October, and then they buy the all-around jacket in November or December, thinking that they're going to need that for the winter, and then if like a few months later they say, well, you know what, actually, like the anorak was good enough for all winter, and so they'll return the all-around jacket to me, and I feel like that's not really a failure. That's more like the anorak turned out to be more versatile than they expected. Mm-hmm. But if people will try the stuff, they'll usually really like it. And the other thing is important is not to sabotage it with the base layer. A lot of people don't understand that the base layer is really more important than the outer layer, and they'll wear cotton or something that kind of sabotages the wool.
Yeah, I think I found that out. If like I had I don't know why I put it on underneath because we were going out for the day, but I had just a puffy jacket, synthetic puffy jacket under that mouton jacket, and I was freezing to death.
Oh.
And I was like, why am I so cold? Maybe I was tired. Maybe I didn't eat enough. Probably dehydrated. But I took that jacket off and just put the mouton back on, and I was like, oh, I was happy as a clam. It was fine, good to go. So it's just, and I'm not a scientist going based off feels on this one, but it made a huge difference to not have that layer underneath. And I think, and that's where people get into trouble. Maybe they get the wool jacket or whatever, but then it's not layered correctly, or there's something. People also overlayer, and I think that needs to be talked about too, because they squish all that air out of there, and there's no air to trap. Right. And I think that's
you lose your insulation.
That's the beauty of wool, is you don't have to overlayer.
What you said a minute ago, though, is really important. We can do all the lab tests we want, and I'm all for that. But the only test that really counts is the person out in the weather, mm-hmm. and how that person feels. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like the old joke about the bumblebee, like a bumblebee can't fly. Yeah, tell that to the bumblebee. Mm-hmm. And I know that's really because the bumblebee's wings flex and all that sort of stuff. That the standard aeronautics for airplanes is different. But what counts is the thing out in the field. So you can take your lab tests and your instruments and your wind speeds and humidity and all that, and it's really pretty cool, and it gives you a lot of ideas. But the only thing that's going to count is the kind of test you just described. You had the puffy underneath, and it didn't work. So you might say, well, the puffy can do this, and the mouton jacket can do this. So you put the two of them together, and you're going to get 4 + 4 equals 8. And it turned out that 4 + 4 really only equaled 3.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I love the wool. It's the synthetics where it's like I just don't like feeling like I'm wearing a garbage bag, because that's kind of where once I made that switch over, it's like that's kind of what everything felt like.
Yeah,
it was just that.
Well, the other thing you can potentially tell your friends also is that with wool you can wear it day after day, mm-hmm. and a backpacker told me something really cool one time. He was doing a long trek in Canada about 2 weeks, which at least for me is a really long trek. And his buddies were wearing synthetics, or the people he was talking to were wearing. He did it solo, but the people he was talking to were synthetics believers, and they said like, yeah, but the wool is so heavy, like you're really gonna regret that as you put on the miles. And he said, I'm not going to be carrying anything except an extra pair of socks. He said, like, I'm going to be wearing all my clothes the whole time, mm-hmm. except for another pair of socks. Mm-hmm. And, I talked to him afterwards, and he said that it didn't matter, rain, snow, whatever, dry, it was unusually cold or unusually warm. He just wore the same clothing day after day, and it was no problem.
Yeah, 100%. So, it doesn't develop that funk.
And not carrying anything. So when the temperature went up or down, or the humidity or the precipitation, the wool just handled all of it. And so, yes, it's heavier and it's bulkier, but if you're not bringing extra stuff, that makes up for a lot. And of course, the typical camper is around fire a lot, so that's a big bonus with the wool as well. Mm-hmm. For me, one of the huge compliments is when people who can wear anything that they want choose to wear our stuff. And of course, the people who are going to appear on TV can really, they can call any manufacturer and say, I'm going to be on this TV show, or, and I'd like to wear your, and then they'll get it for free. We've had a bunch of those people who never let on to me that they were, I shouldn't say a bunch, but we've had a few who didn't let on to me what they were doing. They bought stuff. I remember last summer, Debbie and I were in a hotel driving cross country. Stopped in a hotel for a night. We turned on the TV, and we see this woman wearing WeatherWool, and we had no idea who it was. And our customers told us who it was, and she just bought our stuff, and that was a huge kick. And for us, thanks to you wearing it on the set, we've gotten to know Josh Kirk, mountain man from Lander with the Bison Rancher. We'll be visiting with Josh again. We've known him for a few years now. We'll be visiting with Josh again next week. Really great guy and a lot of fun. And we've gotten to know, not in person yet, but on the phone, emails, the Yoren brothers. And one of the things that was a little bit funny about that, I had learned this from you. Kid called me and we started talking, and I sent him an all-around jacket in the Lynx pattern and a double hood. And then not long after, his brother Harry, who's also on Mountain Men, contacted me, and Harry was saying, boy, I really like Kid's jacket. And so I knew that you really wouldn't be happy with both of the Yoren brothers wearing Lynx pattern. So before I sent him anything, I checked with you, and you said, yeah, send him a jacket, just don't send him another Lynx pattern. And then we have Mike Horstman in Kodiak Island, Alaska, who has Lynx, a Lynx anorak. He wears it pretty frequently, and I've never spoken with Mike, but he loves to text, and so he'll get on a texting roll, and we'll go back and forth for a while, and then I won't hear from him again. I recently sent him a basic vest in the drab green color. We're gonna figure out what else we can send to Mike, and I also got to meet Jake Herrick, and now his wife Annika, and we had dinner with them and their family. And coincidentally, Annika comes from a family of sheep ranchers. Jake, I think, may have a deal with Sitka, so he hasn't been on the show in WeatherWool for a while, and I hope it's a great deal he's getting from Sitka. He's a really good guy, and their family is wonderful. And a couple of people have told me I should send something to Tom Orr. I haven't been in touch with Tom yet, but it turns out that last night or the night before, we had dinner with a good friend of Tom Orr. That was just by coincidence. And when we'll be in Lander with Josh Kirk, he's also friends with Tom, so I'll talk about that again. But for us, being on TV I don't know if the public generally knows this, but the bigger clothing companies, those with the budget, will spend huge money to have their stuff on TV. Mm-hmm. There was a guy, I would say this goes back about 7 years, who I'm not even sure how he heard about us, but I was in touch with a guy who has his own TV show, and he really liked our wool, and he was playing around with it, and he said, well, I'm really interested in throwing in with you guys. And we talked about different things, and he debated it for a while, and then he told me, you know what? He said, I'm paid way into six figures to wear something else, and I don't have to do anything except wear it. He said, if I work with you, I'm spending my own money, I'm giving up that money, and what we do together may or may not work. He said, like, nothing against what you guys are doing, I like it, but I'm just going to keep taking the six figures. And there's some big money out there in the TV show world, and so when people want to wear our stuff just because they like it, we kind of thank you very much. That means a lot.
Well, I think that's the big thing. None of those guys on Mountain Men, they all have one thing in common. They're not going to do anything they don't want to do. And I was the same way. I'm not going to wear, I don't care if it sucks and it doesn't work, I'm not going to wear it because I don't want to be cold or uncomfortable or whatever. And for those guys, it was the same way. But they could also see the old benefits of that wool. But, your wool is better, I think. I'm not just saying that. And I know we've talked about that a lot, too.
I hope, this is just me speaking with love of the ranchers, love of the wool, and wanting to see things done better. I like to see more people coming into the wool space, and I like to see things being done better. Maybe it's foolish of me to want more people to be making wool, but it's a big country out there, and we're only wearing 2 or 3% wool. It's like we're wearing next to no wool. There's a lot of room for us to grow, and I would like to see the ranchers do a lot better. I would like to see people dress better. I would like to see us wear clothing that's better for the environment. And another frontier, which we didn't even talk about yet, is a lot of us are wearing clothing that's potentially toxic, semi-toxic. Supposedly our fertility rates are way down, like Americans are having trouble making babies. Some people, I don't know if this is true, but some people are pointing at the clothing we're wearing and saying that we're wearing clothing that's really monkeying with our hormones. Is it true? I don't know. It seems undeniable that the birth rate is falling, and that we don't necessarily want it to. And then there's other things, like aside from that, our skin is a very large organ. We absorb a lot of things, including some medicines. Like there's lots of medicines, they just rub it on your skin, it'll be absorbed. So the clothing that we're wearing, the synthetic stuff, but also natural stuff, cotton, WeatherWool, made with dye. And the dye is not the only thing. Like usually the dyes have something called a mordant, which I think helps the dye penetrate the fiber or is fixed to the fiber. There's another thing called the dispersant, which helps the dye disperse evenly throughout the fabric. And I don't know what happens to that stuff. We have had WeatherWool tested for different chemicals, and it comes out really well. But I wonder about the tests because I've worked in labs, and it's really easy to screw up lab results. Also, the people running the labs know what I want to hear. So, if they don't say your stuff is good, I'm not questioning their integrity. I'm just saying that, I saw a meme lately, and it said, I followed the science, and 97% of the time it led me to the money. And I want to, if I can, I want to make the cleanest clothes that we can, both for the people who wear them in the environment, and wool can be really good at that. So anyway, I had a really good time here talking with you, and thanks very much for hosting us, and thanks huge for getting us involved in the Mountain Men and on TV. That kind of stuff is so valuable to us, not just because we have decided to try to avoid advertising, but just because it tells us that people who are really out in the weather like our stuff. It's huge, and we're really grateful to you, and it's always been fun talking to you as well.
Oh yeah, it's been great. It's been awesome getting to know you, and I didn't do anything special. All I did was buy an anorak one time, and I wore it, and I think that's where, that's the compliment to the product you have is, people want to wear it once they figure it out. Yeah. And that's pretty cool.
It's nature. As a customer said to me one time, I was trying to talk some science, and he just said, God knows what he's doing.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay, you nailed it.
Yep.
You can't top that.
Exactly. Yeah. Cool.
So thanks very much.
Yeah.
It was great seeing you.
Yeah, it was good. I'm glad we finally got to meet, and you guys came down, and yeah. I love wool. Everybody loves wool. So
we'll stay in touch.
Yeah, for sure.